Jesus never once said the words, "I am God." Not in Matthew, not in Mark, not in Luke, not in John. You can search every red-letter edition of the New Testament and you will not find that sentence anywhere, which raises an uncomfortable question. If Jesus never said it, why does Christianity rest on it? The answer is that he said something else, something the people who heard it found so much more explosive that they tried to stone him on the spot. Not once, multiple times, always the same reaction, always the same two words at the center of it. And those two words have a backstory that goes back not to Bethlehem, not to Genesis, but to a burning bush in the middle of a desert where a barefoot shepherd asked God for his name. Open almost any theological debate about Jesus, and within minutes, someone will say, "But did Jesus ever actually claim to be God?" It is a fair question, and the honest answer is, not in those words. The phrase, "I am God," does not appear on the lips of Jesus in any of the four Gospels. Neither does, "I am the second person of the Trinity." Neither does, "Worship me." The systematic theology we now use to describe who Jesus is, much of that language was forged in councils and creeds, centuries after his death. So, if Jesus did not use that language, what did he use? He used something older, something that did not need explaining to a first-century Jewish audience because they already knew exactly what it meant, and that is precisely why it was so dangerous. To understand what Jesus actually claimed, you need to go back roughly 14 centuries before he was born, to a man standing at the edge of the wilderness of Midian, staring at a bush that was on fire but not burning up. Moses is 80 years old. He has been tending sheep in the wilderness for 40 years. He was raised in Pharaoh's palace, educated in the most powerful empire on earth, and walked away from all of it after killing an Egyptian and spending 4 decades in exile. Whatever ambition he once carried has been ground down by decades of routine and regret. He is not looking for a divine encounter. He is doing his job, and then he sees it. A thorn bush on fire. But the branches are not charring, the leaves are not crisping. The fire is burning without consuming. He turns aside to look, and a voice calls his name out of the flame. "Moses, Moses." God tells him he is standing on holy ground, that he has seen the suffering of Israel, that he is sending Moses back to Egypt to lead them out. Moses pushes back. He asks 5 questions, 5 separate objections, and the second one is the one that matters for our purposes. Moses said to God, "If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' what shall I say to them?" Exodus 3:13. It is a practical question. Moses knows how the ancient world works. Every nation had its gods, and gods had names. Names carried identity, authority, and character. If you did not know a god's name, you could not invoke him, could not pray to him, could not distinguish him from any other deity in the crowded ancient marketplace of divine beings. Israel has been in Egypt for 400 years. They have been surrounded by Egyptian gods with names Ra, Osiris, Isis, Horus. Moses needs something he can bring back, a name. God's answer is one of the most studied and most debated sentences in all of Scripture. Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, Hebrew, 3 words. Translated in most English Bibles as, "I am who I am," or sometimes, "I will be what I will be." God then shortens it. "Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you." Exodus 3:14. That phrase, Ehyeh, comes from the Hebrew verb haya, to be, to exist, to become. It is first person, present tense, active, absolute. Not, "I was," not, "I will be," not, "I exist," among other things that exist. Simply, I am, no object, no qualifier, no explanation. Being itself, self-defining, self-sustaining, not dependent on anything outside itself for its existence. The Jewish philosopher in Alexandria, writing a century before Christ, struggled to translate this. He landed on Ho, on the one who is, the self-existent one, the ground of all being. This is the name Moses carried back to Egypt. Not a proper name you could write on a temple wall, an ontological claim, a statement about the nature of existence itself, and it becomes the most sacred syllable in Jewish theology. Over the centuries following Moses, the divine name evolved in how it was handled. The 4 consonants YHWH, what scholars call the Tetragrammaton, became so sacred that Jewish tradition stopped pronouncing it altogether. In synagogue readings, whenever the text had YHWH, the reader would substitute Adonai, meaning Lord, which is why your English Bible says Lord in small capitals wherever the Hebrew has the divine name. But the memory of the burning bush stayed alive. The Ehyeh, the I am, remained embedded in Jewish consciousness as the moment God revealed his own nature, not just his title, but what he fundamentally is. When the Hebrew scriptures were translated into Greek in the centuries before Christ, the translators rendered Ehye Asher, Ehye as ego eimi ho, on I am the being, or I am the one who is. Ego eimi, I am. That Greek phrase entered Jewish vocabulary as shorthand for the divine self-declaration at the burning bush. Educated Jews in the first century, which included most of the Pharisees, the scribes, the priests Jesus argued with, knew exactly what those two words carried. And then Jesus started using them. John chapter 8, Jerusalem. The treasury of the temple. Jesus is in an argument with a group of Pharisees about his identity, his testimony, his origins. The conversation escalates. Jesus tells them that if they do not believe that he is who he claims to be, they will die in their sins. They ask him who he is. He speaks about his father, about where he came from, about where he is going. And then he says something that seems like an impossible chronological claim. Your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad. John 8:56. The Pharisees seize on this. They are incredulous. You are not yet 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham? John 8:57. Abraham had been dead for roughly 2,000 years. And Jesus answers, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, ego eimi. John 8:58. Before Abraham was, I am. Not, I was. Not, I existed before Abraham. But, I am. Present tense. Absolute. Unqualified. He did not say I was alive before Abraham was born. That would have been extraordinary enough. He shifted the grammar deliberately. Abraham was past tense, a historical figure who came into being and passed out of it. Jesus uses ginomai, became, the word for created, contingent existence. Abraham came into being. Jesus, by contrast, simply is. Same verb as Exodus 3:14. Same grammar, same weight. The response in the room is immediate, so they picked up stones to throw at him. John 8:59. The text does not explain why. It does not need to. Every Jewish person in that room knew exactly what just happened. Jesus had applied the burning bush declaration to himself. He had stepped into the divine name, and under Jewish law, the penalty for blasphemy for a human being claiming to be God was death by stoning. They were not confused. They were not offended by something they misunderstood. They understood perfectly, and they reached for rocks. But John chapter 8 is not the only place this happens. Go back to John chapter 6. Jesus has just fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. The crowd wants to make him king by force. He withdraws. That night, his disciples are crossing the Sea of Galilee in a boat, and a storm comes up, and they see a figure walking on the water toward them. Matthew and Mark record the story. But John records what Jesus says when he reaches them. Ego eimi, me phobestha, I am. Do not be afraid. John 6:20. Most English translations render this as, it is I, or it's me, a perfectly reasonable English idiom when someone is identifying themselves in the dark. But the Greek is the same 2 words, ego eimi. And the disciples' reaction, in John's telling, is that the boat immediately reached the shore. Matthew records that they worshipped him. Earlier in the same gospel, John 4, at a well in Samaria, Jesus is speaking with a Samaritan woman about living water and eternal life. She says to him, I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things. Jesus responds, Ego eimi, holalon soy, I am, the one speaking to you. John 4:26. To a Samaritan woman, at a well, in the middle of the day, Jesus announces himself not with a title, not with a credential, but with the divine name from the burning bush. Then John chapter 18, the night of his arrest. Judas has brought a cohort of soldiers and officers to the Garden of Gethsemane. They have torches and weapons. They are looking for Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus steps forward and asks who they are looking for. They say Jesus of Nazareth. And he says, Ego eimi, I am he. John 18:5. The English adds he to make it grammatical. The Greek has only the 2 words, and the text records what happened next. When Jesus said to them, I am, they drew back and fell to the ground. John 18:6. A cohort of Roman soldiers, armed, trained, backed by the authority of the empire, and 2 words knocked them off their feet. The text does not explain the mechanism, it simply records the effect. And then Jesus asks again. They say Jesus of Nazareth again, and he says, Ego eimi again. John 18:8. Once you see this, it is impossible to unsee it. John structures his entire gospel around ego eimi statements. Not just the absolute ones, the ones that echo the burning bush directly, but the 7 great I am declarations that each carry an image. I am the bread of life, John 6:35. I am the light of the world, John 8:12. I am the door of the sheep, John 10:7. I am the good shepherd, John 10:11. I am the resurrection and the life, John 11:25. I am the way, the truth, and the life, John 14:6. I am the true vine, John 15:1. 7 statements. And in Jewish numerology, 7 is not accidental. It is the number of completeness, of divine fullness. But notice what each one does. Each one takes something Israel already understood about God and says, "That is me." God provided bread in the wilderness manna from heaven. I am the bread from heaven. God was the light that led Israel through the desert, the pillar of fire by night. I am the light of the world. God was the shepherd of Israel, Psalm 23, Ezekiel 34. I am the good shepherd. God said in Deuteronomy 32-39, I kill and I make alive. I am the resurrection and the life. John is not building a philosophical argument. He is constructing a portrait, layer by layer, statement by statement. He is showing that everywhere Israel had encountered God in the wilderness, in the Psalms, in the prophets, they had been encountering the one who now stood in front of them, teaching from a borrowed boat, turning water into wine at a wedding, weeping outside a dead man's tomb. Here is why this is more explosive than simply saying, I am God. If Jesus had walked into the temple courtyard and announced, I am God, the response would have been immediate and dismissive. It would have been the claim of a madman, straightforward blasphemy, nothing to wrestle with. But he didn't do that. He stepped into a tradition. He placed himself inside a story his audience already knew by heart. He used the vocabulary they had inherited from Moses, from the wilderness, from centuries of encounter with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He did not announce a new religion. He claimed to be the fulfillment of the old one. And that is far more difficult to dismiss, because it forces a different question. Not, is this man crazy? But, is this man right? The Pharisees who picked up stones understood the claim better than many modern readers do. They were not reacting to vague spiritual poetry. They heard the burning bush in his words. They heard Exodus 3:14, and they had 2 options, believe him or kill him, which is exactly the point C.S. Lewis was getting at in his famous argument that a man who made these claims left no room for the comfortable middle ground of good moral teacher. A good moral teacher does not apply the divine name from the burning bush to himself in the treasury of the temple. That is either the truest thing ever said or the most catastrophic lie ever spoken. There is no third option. And consider what this means about the Old Testament. Every time a voice spoke from a cloud and called itself I am, every time Israel cried out to the Lord and the Lord answered, every time the Psalms said, the Lord is my shepherd, or the Lord is my light and my salvation, Jesus is saying, that was me. He is not introducing himself as a new character in the story. He is revealing that he has been there from the first page, which is exactly why John opened his gospel the way he did. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Not became God, not was like God, was God. And then, 14 verses later, the Word became flesh and tabernacled among us. The burning bush in Exodus was not just a miracle, it was a preview. God's presence, filling an ordinary physical object without consuming it. Radiant, real, located in a specific place, approachable, but only if you were willing to take off your sandals and acknowledge that the ground had changed. And then one day, the presence that filled the bush took on something more than wood and acacia branches. It took on skin and bone, and a voice that could be heard without a fire behind it. And he walked up to a fisherman on a beach and said, follow me. And to a Samaritan woman at a well, I am the one speaking to you. And to a crowd that wanted to stone him, before Abraham was, I am. There is a moment in Exodus 33 where Moses makes the boldest request in the Bible. Please show me your glory. Exodus 33-18. God answers that no one can see his face and live. He hides Moses in the cleft of a rock and lets his glory pass by. Moses sees the back of God. A glimpse of the trailing edge of divine presence, and even that is enough to make his face shine so brightly that the Israelites could not look at him directly. That was the closest anyone had come. The back of God from inside a crack in a rock. John chapter 1 verse 18 says, no one has ever seen God, the only begotten Son, who is at the Father's side. He has made him known. The Greek word for made him known is exegeseto. It is the root of our word exegesis, to lead out, to unfold, to narrate, to make visible what was hidden. Jesus did not just announce God, he narrated God, in a life, in a death, in an empty tomb on the third day. The philosophers searched for the rational principle behind the universe. The Hebrews waited for the Lord to speak again. Moses asked for a name and got two words that contained everything. I am. And one day, the I am who spoke from the fire sat down at a dinner table, broke bread with his friends, washed their feet, and told them, "If you have seen me, you have seen the Father." John 14-9. Not a statement carved in stone. A man, looking his friends in the eyes, the night before he died. The burning bush is not behind us. It is still burning. The one who inhabits it has not retired, has not gone silent, has not stopped speaking. He is still the same two words, I am, and he is still saying them. If this opens something for you, share it with someone who thinks Jesus was just a good teacher. Subscribe if you haven't yet, leave a comment. Even one word helps this reach further than you might expect. And may the God who spoke his own name from a burning bush speak with clarity into whatever you are carrying right now.